He's Dave, and I'm Dallas, and we have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes they're on point, and sometimes they go down better with a glass of wine. Join us. This is the Wine and Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Wine and, the show where we pair wine with movies, TV, music, books, comics, and maybe one day we'll pair it with, I don't know, peanut butter cups. Just peanut butter cups. And yes, I'm on a diet. Well, a cut, as they say. As us people who work out all the time, we like to say we're cutting, we're not bulking.
As the fitness aficionados say.
Yes. Yes. So I have to talk in the YouTube health, bodybuilding influencer
fitness
parlance.
Bro lingo.
The fitness bro. I am cutting. So I am, because it's not really a diet. I'm not really eating anything differently. I'm not changing anything. I'm just eating less of all the shit that I love to eat. I'm still drinking some wine, but I am drinking less every night. I am culling that back a little bit because I got a little out of control. I snacked a little bit too much. You know, doing this podcast, doing the Substack, doing the show, the Wine and Comic Show before that, I'm at a computer so much more, and like just sitting and focusing and doing things. And that's a little more sedentary than I was used to. And I also started to get into munchy bad habits. And getting into, like, you know, you're just like sitting and you're like, okay, and I started to set up this like an idiot. I set up the snacks within arm's reach.
Oh, don't do it. No.
It was so dumb. It was so dumb. I had so many good habits of like, well, I have to get up and go to the kitchen. And so, of course, I didn't that often. The wine. So, and when summer hit, the wine even all moved into the temperature-controlled bedroom, which is also the home office, which is also where I do all the work on the computer. And I got it out. The wine fridge is in the kitchen. And so the wine in the wine fridge is temperature controlled there, but everything else is in here. And when I have a bottle open, I move it into here to just sort of be with me. I mean, it was all just stuff that I was like, okay.
The vice cave.
Exactly. And, you know, I never allow myself to go completely out of control. Like, I've already been on a cut for about 3 weeks-ish now, and I'm already seeing the difference. But I just noticed, like, I usually have a puffy face and first thing in the morning, but it fades by about noon. That puffiness is all gone. And then I was like, ooh, some of that puffiness ain't going nowhere. I think that little extra body fat, that's a little cherub fat, you know, going on there. On the face that was coming in, I'm very proud. I still have a six-pack. Thank you very much. And that six-pack.
Humble brag, ladies.
humble brag, ladies. Especially at my age, I'm very proud to still have a six-pack, and I work very hard at it. But, you know, you get, if you let yourself go for a little bit, it's like, ooh, it's a little less visible. It is that body fat percentage thing where I'm just like, okay. I just need to spend, 4 to 6 weeks of eating a little bit less and just controlling myself, getting back in those good habits. Anyway, so I'm dreaming of peanut butter cups is the point, because peanut butter cups were one of the snacks I had within arm's reach of me during that time. And yeah, not a good idea. Don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Keep all the snacks in another room. You have to get up and move your sedentary ass to go get them. The wine, put it in the other room. I mean, like, all those things. Just, figure out, put it in the
welcome back to the thick boy club, Dave. Even if your stay is
I mean,
short-lived.
thankfully, I didn't quite get there, and so it should only be about 1 to 2 months, and I'll be right back to where I was. That is the goal.
There you go.
But it is like they were bad habits, so it is that thing where I keep turning and reaching for the snacks that aren't there anymore, and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, Jesus. It's like, it's so ingrained. It's hysterical how a habit becomes like a nervous tick.
A habit becomes routine.
Yes. And it's like, oh my God. It's like, what, like, right hand, stop reaching for the snacks. It's so mindless that I was just like, wow, did I get into bad habits there? Jesus
my big snacking problem is I have this real curious thing where I have to have something salty followed immediately by something sweet. And Ditto. Snack does that as well or as expertly or efficiently as a trail mix of specific types of trail mix. The problem is a half a cup of trail mix is like 1,000 calories.
Exactly. See, trail mix is like peanut butter where it's like, it's quote unquote healthy. Oh. Right. It's nutritional. but it's
Yeah.
high caloric
Oh, it's
impact.
high
And
caloric
people
intake
don't
for
realize,
sure.
like, anything with nuts is
Yeah.
like a little goes a long ass way.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, nuts and
Oh,
dried
that's the
fruit
problem.
are both healthy for you in terms of snacks, but
Yeah.
you
Right.
cannot eat much
You can't.
because
You
it
can't
is actually
snack on it. You can't
no, not
snack on
really.
it.
Not really. Or you can't mindlessly while you're watching something or listening to something or working on
Yeah.
something, because half a bag of
Oh.
fucking trail mix
Oh.
is like your daily caloric intake right there in one go. There's a reason trail mix is something you're supposed to snack on while you're
Right.
moving
Right. While you're
incessantly and
expending hundreds
sweating
of calories
right
in motion.
through a
Yes.
fucking trail. You're hiking and you eat that while you're never stopping, and that's
Right.
what keeps you going. But if you're at home sitting on your bum,
It's a
you
problem,
can't
guys.
you can't snack on trail mix. Yeah.
It is a
I'm with you there.
problem.
That was
And this is a public service announcement. If anyone out there is involved in the making and distribution of trail mix, M&Ms and sugar-coated candies do not belong in trail mix. They are the bane of my existence. It's the most disgusting textural experience on the face of the planet. Thank you. This has been my TED Talk.
What about like yogurt covered raisins and
That
things
I can
like
do.
that?
I love
You're
yogurt.
okay
I
with them?
love raisins
Oh.
in anything except chocolate. Yeah.
Okay. But
Yeah.
what about like not candy coated, but just like chocolate covered almonds, but like proper
Oh
chocolate?
yeah, that's
almonds,
great.
not fucking Hershey's.
That's great.
Okay.
Chocolate covered.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something about the M&M
Just
texture.
not the candy. Just
Oh,
not the
yeah.
the direct candy shit. Okay.
Yeah,
Got
just
it.
stop that. All of you, stop.
Okay, stop that.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, anyways, bear with me here, especially if I'm a little hangry during today's episode and dreaming of peanut butter cups when I should be thinking about other things. But let's get right into it and see how I do. If you like what you hear today, please make sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. It does help this podcast grow and reach new listeners, conquer the world, all those fun things. And if you love us, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you don't love us, send us an email. Tell us why you don't love us. Say it to our face, mother effer. Do so by sending us an email to wine, the letter N as in nowhere, pod as in podunk, at gmail.com, winenpod@gmail.com. We are also on Substack. Substack subscribers are the first to know when new episodes drop and can regularly interact with us, gain access to bonus pairings, articles, interactive polls. We just had our first to decide what our next novel after today's episode is going to be. And it turned out that poll actually decided the next 2 novels we're going to be tackling after today's novel. So see what you missed when you're not following us on Substack. So get your bum over there. Talking about getting off our bum today on this podcast. So get off your bum and go online. I know it's not the same thing, but online, get off your online bum and go elsewhere online to wineand.substack.com. That is wineand.substack.com. We would love to see and hear from you there. And since we know you're already doom scrolling while you listen to this podcast, go ahead and find us on all the socials as well under the name Wine and, the full and, A-N-D, pod, Wine and Pod. That is our handle on the socials, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Go find us there. All the socials. Follow us there. Only no. YouTube, yes. OnlyFans, no. Not yet. We are not that desperate yet. We'll see how this podcast goes and how it develops. It is a work in progress, after all. Let's see where the audience wants us to go. I mean, I don't know. All right. So to wrap this up, know that most of the time we discuss things we love here, though sometimes we will dissect something that we hate. That day is coming, like the 2024 election, so look for that. But whatever it is you love, whatever it is you hate, there is a wine that pairs with that. All right. So today, we're going to talk about the novel, The 3-Body Problem, the first book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. Say that 10 times fast. The Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Chinese author Liu Cixin.
Who, by the way, is the first Asian winner of the Hugo Award, just in case anyone's wondering.
Yes, and we'll get a little bit into his history as we get a little deeper. But first, this is our new format where we talk about the wines right up front and what we're drinking with this novel today. So, Dallas, what are we drinking with this book? What do you got?
All right. assuming we will probably read all three novels, as we like to do things sequentially here. Maybe not in the
100%.
near future, but we'll get around to it.
Nearish.
And
Nearish.
and with that in mind, I wanted to pair this book one, with something that was sort of a mirror of the jumping off point that we experience with novel one. And on the glass today, I have a 2023 Dynamico White Portuguese, of course. Its two grapes are the Bical and the Arinto. The Bical grape is white grape. I should probably hold that up there.
Yeah,
The
hold
Bical
that up
grape
and
is
hold it still for a moment, because your camera's got a...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
All right.
There you go.
Let me step
Good to
back.
go.
Its two grapes are the Bical, which is 80%, and the Arinto, 20%. Very well-known grapes from the Portuguese region. The Portuguese Bical is known for its sparkling wine production. It is a very winter and cold stable wine. And let's see, the nose reminds me of a pear, which is typically what you get with the Bical. On the palate, it is refined and creamy and relatively smooth. It has a really acute minerality and saltiness, due to, of course, the terroir. By the way, I've heard 3 people pronounce the word terroir this week, and they're all different pronunciations. And I love that word because it really highlights speech impediments or differences. Anyway, I know, I love it. What's curious about this wine is that, about the winery actually, is their slogan is authentic wines without makeup. And I think book one is just that. It doesn't hide or conceal too much. It's fairly straightforward. And it kind of gives you exactly what you expect and you want, as sort of a first note to this movement of books. So, yeah, that's my wine. And I look forward to drinking more of it as as we start book 2 in the future, to see if I come up with something else. And it will likely be that I come up with something else, because I do like a curation when it comes to these wines. So
yeah, that's interesting, your point about the book being very straightforward. We'll of course talk more about that here in just a moment, but I think I mostly agree and somewhat disagree, but you're onto something there with that, though, one way or the other. This book was very interesting for a number of reasons, but so for me, I am drinking with this book today. I have a wine here. Now, the cutesy direct connection, sort of poetical connection that's very on the nose, this is a wine from a winery called Telescope. So, of course, this is all about stargazing and first contact with aliens. And I'm like, all right, well, I got this bottle of wine here from this place called Telescope. But thankfully, this really did work out well, because Telescope is a winery that is all about bringing native Bulgarian wines to America. That is what the winery was created for. So this is a Bulgarian Mavrud from 2016 from the Telescope Group. This is a husband-wife duo, and the wife is a Bulgarian native, and so she introduced her American husband to Bulgarian wines. He was blown away. He was like, ooh. And of course, these Bulgarian wines do not exist much, if at all, in America. They're hard to find. They're not very prevalent. And so he's like, okay, I want to start. They created Telescope to bring over native grapes and native varietals to the States. So Telescope, you got to be in the States. It really only exists in the States, unfortunately. So if you live anywhere else, you're not going to find the Telescope Mavrud. However, go find some Bulgarian Mavrud, because they tried to make this a pure expression of the varietal from Bulgaria. So it's probably going to be indicative of what a proper Bulgarian Mavrud is going to taste like, even if you find another producer of it. But this is, to my knowledge, my first Bulgarian wine that I ever had. So Bulgaria it's broken down into 5 main viticultural areas, but one of them is the Thracian Valley, which is right on its border with Greece. So it's the southernmost part. warmer than a lot of other parts of Bulgaria. And this is in a place, and please, terroir nerds out there, if anyone knows what this is, can you please tell me what this is? But it says that this is on the hills of the Thracian Valley with a terroir. There we go. And I like to go terroir. I like to give it a little R in the terroir.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, because I'm American, I'm English. I'm like, not terroir, it's not terroir. It's just like,
Right.
no. I gotta give it a hint of an R at the very least. So terroir, right? And it's like, so it has a terroir of clay and something fucking called cinnamon forest soils. If
Cinnamon
anyone
forest.
knows, yes.
Well,
I Google,
cinnamon is the bark of a number of trees, not just one, bushes.
Yep.
The soil can sometimes be a little sweet, as far as I know.
Maybe. And that's the thing. Is it literally the soil of a forest that grows cinnamon? Trees that will become cinnamon bark that become cinnamon. And they're like, yeah, this is a forest of literal cinnamon. This is where we grow it. And we just called the soil cinnamon forest soil. But I Googled it, and all these research papers came up about cinnamon forest soils, none of which fucking defined the goddamn thing. And we're just like, this grows well in gray. There were different types. Like one said gray cinnamon forest soils. And I'm like, thanks. What is a cinnamon forest soil? Nowhere could I find anyone actually defining the goddamn thing. So, terroir nerds, what is a cinnamon forest soil? Is it literally just
Let us know. Let us know, guys.
Yes. Is the reason no one bothers to define it because it is so self-explanatory to be like, why bother? Like, it is the soil of a cinnamon forest being a forest full of trees of cinnamon. It's like, maybe it is. I'm assuming that has to be what it is. But anyway, this is a terroir of clay.
I'm going to have to do a deep dive on this later at a later date, because it's annoyed me that
I know it's fat.
Interesting.
Ditto.
All right. Anyway, go on.
I dropped it last night on Substack. I was like, terroir nerds, no one responded to it. So I'm like, maybe no one saw it. Maybe no one knows. But I was like, maybe in time for recording this, we'll know. But no one responded. So anyways, a terroir of clay and cinnamon forest soils on the southernmost part in the Thracian Valley of Bulgaria. And this wine is the reason I chose to pair it with this novel. This novel is kind of a little bit of your classic first contact alien novel. It's got that Arthur C. Clarke feel. It's got that Rendezvous with Rama feel. It's got that very classic old school sci-fi where, first contact and whatever was happening in space, like they took it. If you ever go back and really read those shorter 200, 300 page sci-fi novels of the heyday, the sci-fi often goes places that are like really wild and out there. Like they're not.
Oh, it was pure imagination at that point.
Yes. Yeah. And like really stretching like what this might be and going crazy with it. And there's a lot of that in this book, especially in the end.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about this book here in a moment. But so it's classic. It's straightforward, as Dallas said, but there is an element of alienness to this novel, both in the aliens themselves, but also this is a Chinese language novel, translated into into English. And even the translator has a little bit of a postscript where he's like, look, I tried to be faithful. Right. And he worked directly with the author. The author approved of any changes that he might have made. But he's like, I wanted to be faithful, but being purely faithful to another culture's way of thinking about things often does a disservice in its own right, because you're not like the reader of another culture is like, I don't understand this way of thinking. I don't understand this way of thinking about
framework.
Right. The context is sort of missing. And even just like worldviews and the way they talk about these worldviews is something that would keep us at an arm's length. So the translator said, in places, I would tweak it for a Western audience. But in other places, he's like, I thought it was important to keep the feel of the original there. And we're going to leave it that way. So this book, even in its writing, has this element of alienness to it. There is something between Eastern and Western cultures that the way of thinking about things, it is a little off. It's different. And so there's something about it being classic and yet alien at the same time that challenges you in that way. And this wine is very similar. It is a classic red wine in certain ways. It's got the red fruits. It's got these baking spices and this spicy finish, this very clove-like element. Maybe that's the cinnamon forest oils. I don't know. It's not cinnamon directly, but it's got that clove and nutmeg and certain elements of that, something a little spicy and a little sharp.
High spice.
Yeah. So it's nice. It's a little, but there is something about this varietal Mavrud and the way it comes across that is like, there is a little something that is quote unquote different. And I can't quite put my finger on what it is. It's classic and yet alien. And I felt like drinking this wine is very similar to reading this book, where I'm enjoying it. There's a lot to sink your teeth into. And yet at the same time, there is this feeling of being kept at arm's length in certain ways, where you're just like, I have to think about this, and I'm not sure how I feel every step of the way. This is something I've got to sit with. I've got to ponder about a little bit, even though in its way, it's completely easy drinking. There's nothing challenging in ways of like, it's off-putting. It's just different. Yeah, that was my pairing for this one. I thought it worked excellent with that dichotomous feel, that classic sci-fi, yet this is weird. What am I reading? And how is it coming across to me? So we're going to talk about the book specifically here in just a moment, but let's talk about the author now before we get into the book proper. Liu Cixin was born in Beijing in June 1963. Before beginning his career as an author, he was a senior engineer working at a power plant in the Shanxi province. In 1989, he actually wrote 2 full-length novels, Supernova Era and China 2185, but neither book was published at that time. His first published work was a short story, Whale Song, which was published in Science Fiction World in June 1999. That same year, his short story / novella, With Her Eyes, won the Galaxy Award. And in 2000, he wrote a short story / novella, The Wandering Earth, which also received the Galaxy Award and was adapted into a film in 2019. And when his short story Mountain appeared in January 2006, many readers wrote in that they really wanted him to do a feature-length novel next. Not to their knowledge, he had never done one before, even though he had actually written 2. They were just, like under his bed somewhere. He had written them, no one gave a shit, and he was like, all right, well, let's do it. And then he made it big in short stories, novellas, and that was his art form for about like 15-ish years. Like, that's what he was publishing. So it wasn't until this time when people were writing in that he was like, okay, you know what? Going forward after 2006, I'm focusing on feature length only. And he did. So his feature length novels include, he did publish Supernova Era from that one of those 2 first novels. According to online, I believe he eventually published Earth 2185 as well, I think. I could not confirm that exactly with the online sources. It's not in English. You can't find it anywhere in English, but I think it was published in China. Another new novel called Ball Lightning, and then the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, which ended in 2010. During this time that he was writing all these novels, Liu wrote approximately 3,000 to 5,000 words a day.
That's right, buddy.
Books, yep. Each
That's
of his
guy.
books taking approximately 1 year to make per novel. And that is, for those of you who have never tried writing a novel, that is fucking fast.
That's not only is it fast, it's not fast when you're doing an average of 4,000 words a day. Let's be honest. It's actually not fast when you're doing an average of 4,000 words a day.
Well, but I mean, like, that average is fast.
I mean, either way, it's impressive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not pulp novel fast. Like,
Exactly.
Back in the day when people literally put out, now pulp novels are really more like novellas. They're not, they're very short. They're very sweet, but they would do one a month. Like, they were machines that just churned this shit out. This is slower than that, but still very fast by writing standards, especially because they're highly technical. They're steeped in science. Like, this is something that he was very good at and did. Now, since 2010, he has returned to only doing short stories. He's not done a novel since the final novel in this trilogy. So from 2010 till now, it has predominantly been short stories, but he has been doing regular short stories since. That said, this trilogy has recently been adapted into 2 different TV shows. One in the Chinese language, and that is simply called Three Body. And the other is a Netflix show that is produced originally in the English language, called The Number 3 body problem, no hyphen. So, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because then if you go searching for it anywhere, you are searching for two completely different keystrokes, into the search engine. So one will get you the Chinese language one will get you the Netflix one. Now, fun facts about these two shows. The Chinese language show, only one season has come out, but it was 30 45-minute episodes long.
Yeah.
And then the American show covers the entire contents of book one in 8 45-minute to 60-minute episodes. Yes. Now, I have not seen either show, so I cannot speak to either, but the Netflix show has already announced seasons 2 and 3, which
very
will cover
popular,
respectively.
Jeez Louise.
Yes.
And speaking of popularity, the book itself, originally in its original run in China, sold 1.6 million copies, 2 to 6 million copies, which is kind of unheard of, and it's also kind of unheard of for an American translation of a property like that. So, great on them all around. Yeah,
it is.
Big show.
I did want to just to finish off the TV show there with Netflix. Just so people know, it is created and showrun by the Game of Thrones guys. If I'm gonna remember their names, David Benioff and DB Weiss. And then also a third guy, Alexander Wu. Those are the three. Liu Cixin is a creative consultant on the Netflix show. That is the credit that he gets. And that was a deal they worked out because initially everyone was trying to work with China to make one single show that was going to be the show. And it did not work out. No one could agree on an approach and how to go about this, as you can imagine. We're going to get a little bit to how this book got published in China a little bit here too, because they're very censorship heavy, and you're very restricted on what you can say and what you can't, what you can show and what you can't. Whereas obviously, so I think this was for the best. China got to make its show that was perfectly okay by them. And then Netflix simply got the rights via the English language rights and were able to swing around. And by making Liu Cixin only a creative consultant, that kind of let Liu off the hook as well in terms of whatever Netflix was doing. Like, he did not have final say in any of it, so he does not have to take flack for anything that Netflix actually says. In fact, Liu Cixin did a 2019 interview with the New Yorker, and in it he said a lot of things that were very pro Chinese government and approach, and saying like how like democracy is not what Chinese people are interested in. It's not right for them. It wouldn't work over here. He kind of said things that were somewhat like, if you squinted at it, were pro the whatever their child policy is, the one child policy, the a couple other like things that we kind of balk at over here in the West. Now, he said these things probably because he absolutely had to. Like, there's no way you're going to go on record and say anything else. And sure enough, there were like 5 Republican senators here in the States that immediately wrote a letter to Netflix saying like, are you aware of this? And what do you have to say about this? And blah, blah, blah. And Netflix simply wrote them back and said, look, Liu Cixin is not a creator on the show. These views do not reflect the views of Netflix or the actual creators on the show. And the show itself is not about any of these views. The end. And just left it at that and wrote it back. But it's one of those things where Liu Cixin, this book actually, now let's jump right into the book, because this book kicks off with it starts during China's Cultural Revolution, which is a very dark, turbulent, and significant point in Chinese history that leads into the modern era of China. So the Cultural Revolution is a hot topic in terms of for the most part, most authors and movies and TV shows do not tackle it for this reason. It is not something that you bring up that often. It is not something you tackle directly, because it is, for the most part, how the current Maoist government exists and why. And so I know I've mostly consumed Chinese movies and TV, not a lot of Chinese novels to date. A lot of them haven't come over to and been translated to the English language outside of like their great classics, like, you know,
Right.
back in the day. Their Journey to the West and shit like that. They're
Uh-huh.
like folk tales and whatnot. And they're Lord of the Rings fantasies and whatnot. But this, a modern science fiction taking place in modern day China, this you don't see very often. And in movies, there's a reason so many movies are period pieces in China, because it's safe. You can
Exactly.
talk and
Exactly.
you can make villains out of whoever you want. You can have heroes that do whatever they need to do. You can tell whatever story you want in an era of China that has nothing to do with the current government, where they weren't in power. So of course it was a shit show back then. Of course there was corruption everywhere. Of course there were bad guys. If you start talking about anything regarding the modern day China, you're not allowed to have the government do anything wrong or be bad, or
That's right.
any of the policies be bad, or criticize anything of how society currently exists and operates. Like, you are not allowed. And they're very stringent in terms of like crime can never pay. People can't get away with anything. You must show the righteous punishment of people who do these bad things, and so on and so forth. Like, they're very, very stringent about it. So I was kind of amazed when we open this book and it starts in the Cultural Revolution, and it's a shit show, and it's bleak, and it's dark, and it's violent,
bleak,
and
it's
it's the
dark,
trauma.
it's cold, it's
Yes.
stark, it's everything you expect Maoist China to be.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
Imagine the American Civil War, but there were like multiple factions, that it was more chaos, more anarchy versus a proper, divide where there were actual armies still controlled. Like, one army was still the American government and the other one was like wanting to be the new American government. This was just like factious. It was factions. It was multiple factions. There none of them represented like the official government per se at that time. I do not pretend to be a scholar on the Cultural Revolution, so correct me if I say anything wrong about this. This is just my very brief understanding of it. I know it was life altering and changing, but the reason they bring up the Cultural Revolution for this book is it's about the trauma that everyone carries with them from it, and how long it took them to come out of it. And during this time, one of the survivors of the Cultural Revolution, and while the China was still under the shadow of the immediate aftermath of the Cultural Revolution, took decades for them to loosen up to something that even represents the China that it is today. And during that time, this survivor makes a decision to change the course of human history because of her complete lack of faith in humanity, and believing that we have no ability to progress and evolve and be moral or ethical or anything.
And specifically after she loses someone really important to her in a very traumatic way. And what's curious about that moment in the script, in the series, is I actually didn't see that part coming. In the book, I didn't see that part coming. So that
are we talking about the husband?
No.
We're talking about which part?
The father.
Oh, so the beginning. Okay, you didn't see it coming, but it's in the first few. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't know
they were coming, but it is in the first few pages. Okay.
Oh, it's the first few pages, but it's one of those things where I was like, "Oh, right on page 3. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. We're off." That kind of thing. But that moment, and it's stroke of genius for him putting it, in the first 3 pages in the first movement for sure. But
here's the thing:
she loses that person so traumatically. Plus everything else that's going on around, and the context, and being connected to the university, which should be this kind of bastion of of forward thinking and all this stuff. When she gets to that point where she essentially turns her back on the possibility that humanity can save itself, it makes perfect sense. And so it's beautiful when you're walking through that decision with her. It's, for me at least, I was like, yeah, no, I get it. 100%.
Right.
It's
that, but Two things. So two things. One, an interesting fact. In the Chinese edition, this is not the first few pages.
I believe it. No, yeah, I believe it.
Yes, they buried it in the center of the novel.
Oh, yeah.
This whole opening, all the past with the Cultural Revolution, because it got it past the censors.
That's right. Yeah.
They buried it in the middle, and the censors did not read the whole book. They did not have the time for that. They knew that. So they're like, okay, we can't open with it. So the publishers stuck it in the center of the novel as sort of a flashback to the whole thing. And sure enough, no one said Bupkis. And then it became a huge bestseller. What are you going to do after that, right? After it sells 6 point whatever million copies.
You got to recall the whole thing? No, you're stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For the English edition, the translator, Ken Liu, who's an author in his own right, by the way, and this is a translator for book 1. There's a second translator for book 2, and then Ken Liu returns to translate book 3. Very common practice because translating takes so much time and is so hard to do because, as we were mentioning earlier, you're trying to stay faithful while also making it accessible to a completely different language, a completely different brain, that processes language in a completely different way. And that's tough. That is a balancing act. So you can't, it's like if you want 3 books to come out relatively quickly, one after the other, one person ain't doing all that shit. But anyway, Ken Liu did this first one, and he suggested moving that section to the beginning. And the author is on record basically said, or Ken Liu said, the author came back and he's like, oh, that was my original intention.
That's where it belongs.
That was where I wanted it. Right, exactly. So funnily enough, in a weird twist of fate, the English translation is closer to the original authorial vision of this book than the Chinese version, because he didn't have to get past any, outside of the Republican senators, he did not have to get much past any English censors in the way he had to for China. So that's one fun fact. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was, it is the Cultural Revolution and the loss and the trauma there. But then the other main key is how long she got to see her humanity in China spin the wheels and go further into insanity in its way.
Because then she Go ahead.
I was going to say, because then she joined the logging community and saw them just environmentally destroying everything for sort of no real great purpose. It was like, oh, well, the more we chop down, the more money we make. It's like, but do we need to chop all this down? And we're not replanting and we're not rebuilding. And so she watched that happening and no one curbing that. And then, for decades, this went on where the Cultural Revolution, the aftermath, things did not politically thaw for decades. And it's that slowness. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because I feel like politics are sort of at a weird place right now today where people are losing faith because they're not seeing the incremental progress or not caring enough about
collective
the incremental
apathy
progress.
Yeah.
Right. Where they're sort of like, why can't we just, because there's an element in your brain where you're like, but we can cancel student debt, but we can just take the housing market by the fucking throat and say, stop. And, it's like, this is dumb. We have to find a better way. And we don't have the political will. But at the same time, if you look at trends, and I think this is the thing that nowadays, especially, we have the facts, we have the stats, and just take America out of like North America, but the USA specifically. We are more liberal and progressive than we've ever been in our history as a country. We have progressed, but we are more socially liberal than we've ever been in human history. We are still more economically conservative than we are liberal, which is why we can't move the needle on things like canceling student debt, why that will isn't there, because the actual numbers aren't on our side yet. However, we are still becoming increasingly more economically liberal as time goes. Like that needle, it's moving slower than the social elements, but it's moving. And if you look at the trends over history, even though it seems like everything's getting worse because, of course, the extreme factions, the extreme political right, the alt-right, whatever you want to call them, the white supremacists, they are getting more vocal and they're shouting louder. And they're even gaining these weird, like, jury-rigged victories that are frustrating as fuck. But at the same time, the overall trends don't support them. They are, as far as we can tell, they are on their way out. These are their last gasps. And as the new generations take over, they are vastly like, and the boomers, don't forget of how big the fuck, there's a reason they were called, don't forget it's baby boomers. That is the full term. They were a huge population. As they finally fade out, we are all going to be so much more liberal than they ever were or were willing to be. And that is shifting dramatically. But you do have to wait that generational shift. And
That's right.
It is a tragedy that we have to wait that long, that we will not move faster than that. But the movement is happening. And this book is essentially, in my mind anyways, my big takeaway from this is a moral dilemma, a morality play about having faith in that time. And instead what we get someone who has faith in the time of this. She reaches out to an alien race to essentially fix things for humanity.
Correct.
This is the key concept of this book. Now, the alien race, it's not going to arrive to Earth. It's going to take them 450 years to arrive. And she has more faith in letting that happen than humanity evolving over 450 years. That's how much she lost faith in humanity. And the best part about this, or the biggest tragedy of this, is she knows nothing about this alien race. And she's willing to still put her faith in that. And then, of course, a small faction of humans that have also lost their faith form around her. And they're willing, and this is the thing that I think it mirrors today, is that almost libertarian bent, that burn it to the ground and start over viewpoint is better than incremental change. Let it all, like, sometimes I talk to people and I'm like, well, look, in the current system, if you vote, like, voting for a third party is a throwaway vote. It's sacrificing it because they don't have we haven't done the work to make them a proper candidate. So it's not going to work out. It's just going to be a miss. And then the person who's going to gain from it is the person you would never have voted for in the first place. It's only the person you would have voted for otherwise. And when I talk to people like that, I've gotten this response often. They're like, you know what? Like, if Trump gets a second term, that's fine because it'll all just collapse. Then it'll all go to shit. And then we can start over. And I'm like, what do you think starting over means? What do you think that looks like? Because the Cultural Revolution in China was very much that. And it was
scorched earth. It was a start over.
Anarchy.
Absolutely.
And it was pure violence.
Back to zero.
So much trauma. Yes. So much trauma, so much death, so much violence. I'm like, starting from scratch, you don't realize what that means. And you are not as strong and as in a position to survive that as you think you are. Guaranteed. Like, you will not, like, none of us are. We are soft, civilized fucking assholes who think about things and are online more than we're offline. We are not going to survive a truly violent, turbulent, start from scratch, tear it all down, military coup, type of situation. But people would, it's the thing they can't fathom, truly. And so because they can't really imagine what that is, they have faith in it. Whereas the slow, steady progress, which they've been experiencing for their whole life, they're like, well, I fucking hate this. So anything but this.
Right. Absolutely.
And this book is just to summarize that, and then I'm totally hand it back over to you. Sorry, I've been dabbling for a while, but the whole to end this rant, I think this book is, there's a term I'm looking for, I'm fishing for, and I keep stalling for time and I can't come up with it, but cautionary note. It's a cautionary tale. It is a cautionary tale against that view of humanity. Go ahead, Das.
Yes, I think specifically with this book, she ends up essentially begging them, encouraging this alien race, which are called the Trisolarans, to invade Earth, because she truly, in her heart of hearts, believes that it could save humanity from itself in the long term.
And it's the only hope.
And it's the only hope, which is, again, that's a hell of a leap from a character standpoint.
Yes.
But I applaud him for going there. And in order to keep this secret, she does two very specific, horrible things in order to keep this thing secret. And so
Right.
I guess it is ultimately that question you were saying, do you choose scorched earth, or do you choose, the long and winding road of of shoring up your civilization step by step? And I'm curious as to where this goes in book 2. Because ultimately, I believe it
100%.
is. Book 1's definitely a cautionary tale, but I believe by the end of the series, her decision is a bit more sort of human centric and romantic than it's led to be in book 1. But we'll see. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Right. So I do have, from the author's postscript at the end of this book, he does say that, how he got into science fiction and became a lover of science in the first place. And he was talking about, he grew up in China in the 70s and into the 80s. And he's like, I grew up in a village that didn't even have electricity until the 80s. This was not, and it's funny because, again, this postscript, I imagine, does not exist in the Chinese version, because he would not be allowed to say these things. He would not be allowed to say these things about the Chinese government of that time, that they could not get electricity to their people in the 1980s, even when they'd been in power for decades. Right. But he does say that so I'm going to read these 2 paragraphs from his postscript, because I think this really summarizes what this first book is largely about. But I think what book 2 and 3 will still be somewhat about, if not largely about, which is, there's a strange contradiction revealed by the naivety and kindness demonstrated by humanity when faced with the universe. On Earth, humankind can step onto another continent and, without a thought, destroy the kindred civilizations found there through warfare and disease. And when they gaze up at the stars, they turn sentimental and believe that if extraterrestrial intelligence exists, they must be civilizations bound by universal, noble, moral constraints, as if cherishing and loving different forms of life are part of a self-evident universal code of conduct. I think it should be precisely the opposite. Let's turn the kindness we show toward the stars to members of the human race on Earth, and build up the trust and understanding between the different peoples and civilizations that make up humanity. But for the universe outside the solar system, we should be ever vigilant and be ready to attribute the worst of intentions to any others that might exist in space.
Ding, ding, ding.
For the fragile civilization like ours, this is without a doubt the most responsible path.
Very wise words. Very wise words.
Yes. And so this book, and I think the series, is a big piece of, like, again, that thing that is so other, that is so different, that is so unknown. You can put your faith into it because you just don't know what the fuck it is.
You don't know anything about it. You're no reference for it.
Right. Yeah. You can imagine it to be whatever you want. And so that confirmation bias becomes the whole thing. It's whatever you imagine it to be. They haven't proven to be jack shit one way or the other. And so you're just like, I believe because I hate this, because the devil I know is devilish enough that I'm just going to go put my faith in something completely unknown. And this series is all about what happens when you do that.
It is. And it is a dense read, but it moves. It's, I do love the central character. We'll say protagonist. Protagonist.
I call him. It's his POV more than anything else.
Yeah, we'll say protagonist. But the POV.
It's an ensemble book, though, for the most part. Yeah,
it absolutely is. Let's see. Get us back on track here. Where are we?
What I will
timeline?
So let me talk about the 3-body problem. I think that's going to be the next big thing that is kind of a cool thing. So this book, we've already revealed, and it says on the back blurb of the book, this is about first contact with an alien race. So it's kind of a reveal, but it's on the back blurb of the book. So I'm like, like, well, they didn't trust the audience. Because it's funny, I did not read the back blurb of this book until I was nearly done with it. And when I read the back, I'm like, oh, wow, that's the story. That's what this is. Okay, cool. Of book 1 anyways, right? Like, that is the story. So I was like, shit, okay. So I'm not, we're not going to be too precious about that. This first book, as Dallas said, though, this first book is very straightforward in its way. It's much more. I get the feeling the really far flung sci-fi shit is coming
It's
in
coming.
book 2 and 3.
Yeah.
That it's coming. Because it gets there at the very end of book 1 where you're like, whoa, this was not. This is getting cool. But book 1 is all build up and all laying the groundwork. But this is called The Three Body Problem, and this book mostly takes place. Let's say what the three body problem is. So the three body problem is a situation in physics which takes three bodies or point masses in space and tries to predict their movements, their positions, and velocities based on their gravitational effects on each other. So unlike a two body problem, a three body, like say Earth and Moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unlike a two body problem, or just the Earth and the Sun and nothing else, a three body problem has no general closed form solution, which means when three bodies orbit each other, the resulting dynamical system is chaotic for most initial conditions. And the only way to predict the motions of the bodies is to calculate them using numerical methods, basically mathematical equations. And these equations are usually so complex that supercomputers are required to literally compute any possible next situation happening. And the movements, even then, are non-repeating, except in certain very special conditions. So every single movement takes a supercomputer's worth of mathematical calculations, and then you have to do it again for the okay, now we know where they are there, and now what's the next thing going to be? Only once you know where they are next can you then compute the next, because it will not be repeating. It will be different. There's no solution. You just keep computing it forever ad nauseum. One of the first three body problems that was tackled on Earth was, of course, the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. We approached it as a three body problem, but that was what we now refer to as a quote unquote restricted three body problem, meaning one of the three bodies is small enough that it exerts negligible force on the other two. So for all intents and purposes, Earth, Moon, and Sun is just a two body problem, just the Earth and the Sun. And then similarly, like we have our whole solar system, but all the planets are far enough away from each other that they are not exerting influence to change their orbits from each other. So everything's in a fixed orbit around the sun because of that. Once you have the sun and any given planet, the other planets exert negligible influence on the other planets around them. So everything is fixed. And that's why it's a closed form solution where everything is predictable from that point going forward. But in the novel, our lead protagonist, Wang Miao, which we're going to call our protagonist because we get most of the novel from his POV as we follow him around, right? And he's a nanotechnologist who begins to play a video game called The Three Body Problem. In the game, and this is like a virtual reality game. You put on a full body suit and a headset, so you are transported into this. And in the game, he's on a strange alternate reality like version of Earth's history. It's plainly an alien landscape, but they're always in with the pyramids and with these famous historical figures from history like Da Vinci. And
it's the icons of your history book, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're all talking about, in this world, this is a world that goes through what are called quote unquote chaotic eras and quote unquote stable eras. And it's chaotic. You cannot, no one. And so the goal of the game is to try and predict when the next chaotic era begins and when the next stable era begins, how long each lasts. And you're trying to figure out what is going on in this world and how to predict those things, which, as we learn very quickly, is a three body problem. And so that's what they're trying to solve in that. And that is actually the meat of this novel, is playing this video game and trying to solve the three body problem. That's the center of the novel. It's not where we begin and it's not where we end, but that is sort of the core of that.
I think it's what's really interesting about how they sort of create this melange, because it's definitely sort of melange in terms of story points. You've got that three-body problem. By the way, that idea kind of originated, I don't think you said this, Dave, with Isaac Newton's efforts to understand the moon's orbit and the sun's relation and all that stuff. We get Lagrange points because of the three-body system, and of course, chaos theory results as sort of as a sort of a counterpoint as in the study of
chaos theory I think was
predominantly
like micro not macro size, but when you started to go into like what's the word I'm looking for, atoms and things like that.
I mean, but that's essentially that's three body problem, the macro and the micro, but what they end up doing with these characters, particularly with the VR approach, is trying to find a fixed point within the chaos. That is one of those themes that is just so potent. And you have blanked out because you're thinking of a word right now, and I see it on your face. What do you do?
But I am listening to you. Keep going. Sorry, I was trying to figure out because we're talking about the micro, and I can't. All I can think of is the microverse, and I'm like, "Fuck!" I read too many comics. Like, why can I not remember what the actual name of the study of atoms and protons and neutrons is? I'm like, the study of the microverse, and I'm like, "No, Dave, no."
What I love is at least once an episode, one of us has that where we're just blankly staring and nodding, but clearly thinking of something else. Anyway. I forgot my point now. Anyway, we'll erase this from the episode.
I know. I wish you could rewind while we're recording.
I know, right? I know.
Pick up like where we were. I know. That'd be great. But you were talking. I mean, you were.
The chaos.
About,
it's
chaos and movements.
It's curious because there is such
chaos on Earth and like human populations.
Absolutely, and it's kind of it's an interesting kind of thumbnail for the three-body problem because you've got these fixed characters in very specific time periods that are trying to make sense of the sort of cosmos and their place in it. And when he pulls in the VR aspect, it's very interesting because he forces these characters into these worlds where they have to anticipate the chaos, and that's such a sort of a trial for the human in general. It's sort of our sort of one of our constant and consistent existential crises is trying to figure out how to deal with the chaos of being alive.
Right.
And so that VR approach, I think, is really potent. And I'm surprised there's no video game yet, actual purchasable video game that's come out yet. I'm curious. It's that's shocking. So.
I mean,
anyway.
Well, sort of. I think even the book makes a point at one point about how they put the video game out there, and really, it was only the scientists.
There's only scientists
really
who played with it. That's true.
The only scientists that cared enough to really stick with it because it was way too technical and way too demanding for a common game goer. And it is I honestly, I did not know what the three-body problem was before reading this novel.
Okay.
So it made sense. Like when I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, three-body. But I did not realize that there was such a problem to the three-body problem. Like I'd never looked into it. I'd never read up on it. So I was like, oh, interesting. So three, for give or take, equal gravitational forced bodies affecting each other creates chaos. Creates like non-repeating anything. Yeah.
In motion.
And I was like, in motion. So I'm like, I did not realize that. That's Nutter Butters. That's cool.
It is. It's one of those problems, those unsolvable, so to speak, that they've been wrestling with for 250 years, and
yeah. All right. So I think the only other thing to say about this novel is, you start with history, you enter the video game and the understanding of the video game and what it's going to mean to everything else. And that's a slow bit. There's a couple of mysteries going on in this novel as you go through. All the mysteries are revealed. We realize what's happening. We realize what we're up against. And the book actually ends with the aliens. And we spend some time with them. And that was honestly, like, that's where I was like, I think this was so smart because so much of book one, you're like, this is interesting. But like I said, with that keeping you at arm's length, there's something a little alien about the people because it's a different culture, because it's a different way of thinking about things, different way of doing things. I'm like, I feel a little distant from these characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to the aliens and they're properly fully. It's again that suddenly realization that you're like, oh no, the other human civilization isn't
that's
different.
Yeah,
this is fucking different.
Yeah.
This is alien.
Yeah.
But then they also start doing some highfalutin sci-fi things that are really imaginative and really cool. And I'm just like, oh, now I really want to come back for book 2 because it's going to be more of this. It's going to be more of like the crazy ideas.
He's building
as humanity builds up, and he even sets it up that humanity is building up for these aliens' arrival and be able to defend themselves and be able to be on an even playing field by the time they get here. They have 450 years. That sounds like a lot of time, but the aliens throw a monkey wrench in that works of what humans are going to be able to accomplish during those 450 years. It's fascinating. It's imaginative. I give this author so much credit on coming up with this.
And it makes me wonder about the female character, Ye. Is her name?
Ye, yeah.
Wenji.
Ye Wenji.
She is essentially the individual who made the hail, right? She is the individual who said, "Yeah, come, please. Let's." She opened the door, and ultimately, it makes me think that action is a bit more human-centric than we're led to believe in book 1, because what does happen once humanity kind of gets word that this thing is coming? We do close ranks. We do become, one. We do sort of melt those differences away, right?
Except if that was true, she would have told the rest of I don't think that was her intent. Okay. I don't think she had thought that anyway, because she would have told the rest of it, and she did not.
Yeah,
there was there was the whole group that organized around her, and they kept it all secret. Yeah. And they were the ones that were ready. They were still firm believers that this was about saving humanity by the aliens coming and saving it actively as aliens. No one believed otherwise.
We'll revisit this after book 3. in
that's fine, but I'm just saying, even if she changes her mind in book 2 or 3, that's a change of mind. That was not her intent, nor a belief that she has anywhere in book 1.
Yeah, but we'll see.
I've got to argue that. No, I'm
gonna hold out hope. We'll see. But you're right. Okay. Initially, her she was definitely on point and on brand.
She murdered people to keep it a secret.
Yeah, that's true. She did. She killed the hell out of 2 people.
And people close to her, that she was like, you know what? She was so broken. And she's literally like, I kind of felt nothing. Because she felt nothing. She wants to save humanity, while at the same time, she kind of feels nothing for humanity.
Right. She wanted to save humanity, but the individual human, she had no space for.
No faith. But she kind of almost didn't really care about humanity. I think that's the thing. She didn't care about humanity either, kind of. Because she's willing to roll the dice.
Oh, yeah.
On the aliens coming. If they come and just eradicate humanity, well, what were we going to do to each other in any event? Fuck it.
Right.
I think she was at that place. Yeah. And I think that's where it's that ambivalence and the belief that nothing is getting better or ever will. That is the dangerous mindset for humanity, that especially when it even flies in the face of how things are in fact getting better, just excruciatingly slowly.
Right.
When you're living day to day.
Right.
But at the same time, ignoring the fact that where we were 50 years ago, we are so much. We were just talking on the eczema episode that came out last week. It hasn't even come out when we're actually recording this, but that's the plan. It will have come out last week.
Yeah.
We talked about the Joe movie, right?
Yeah.
And about how much conservative America has changed, where slaughtering your daughter because she was doing drugs with hippies, we're like, good on you, Dad. We understand, and we would do the same to our kids. And it's when you really look at how far we've come in terms of empathy and understanding people who aren't exactly like us, and just marching to the exact same beat of the same drum. we're living in a completely different world today than we were then. And we forget because we're living day to day and
can't
still
see the forest
struggling.
For the trees, people. You can't
right.
see the forest for
still
the trees.
Struggling on the day-to-day shit. But that's where we go wrong, is forgetting how far we've come and how much things are still just, we're on the right track. It's still painful. Our friends and family are still getting hurt. Yes, every day. We're still not where we should be. We should be able to snap our fucking fingers and get there. Yes, we should. And that's where we lose faith, is the frustration that we're just not doing it. But it is getting better. And yet, at some point if you lose faith and allow yourself to say, fuck it, burn it all down, that's where you become the bad guy in any story.
Yeah. And that is your Kumbaya minute of the day. And to bring it all home, guys, Three Body Problem is a great book. I'm going to go on a limb here and confess part of my approach to these larger novels is I will have a physical copy and also an audio book, and I alternate between the two. And this one, so far, has been the most interesting because it requires two different sort of cognitive processes, I suppose, and it really kind of came alive. So I'm going to go ahead and highly recommend you guys check out book one. If you are watching the series, feel free to leave us some gripes, notes, some points of interest, because we will eventually get around to that.
I think so, yeah. Or the Netflix one. I don't know about the 30 episode Chinese.
I'm definitely going to watch. I'm definitely going to watch the 30.
Oh my god! Okay, we'll do a special episode where I listen to you talk about it. But I'm like, I might not be able to bring myself to do that. Life is short, dude. Life is short.
Mostly because I'm so interested in the cultural specifics that are present in this.
You know what though? There's a reason I'm not. Like I said, I watch a lot of Chinese cinema. And TV shows as well. And it's like, I know how they water things down and make it 30 episodes of so much less impact and meaning than the book has, because they're going to water it right down to be just, like eye-gougingly frustrating to a Western audience. So I'm like, look, I watch their movies that are like, wow, I could have saved 90 minutes of my time on that movie that was so plainly checked off by the government. And it's like, I do not need to watch 30, 45-minute episodes that have been checked off by the same censors.
I'm definitely, we'll definitely probably do. We have it on the list, a Three Body Problem Netflix. Yes. And then when I get around to watching the Chinese one, it'd be interesting to do a compare and contrast brief discussion.
Be interesting.
So we'll see. Maybe we'll find a special guest we can banter with.
You and a special guest, and I take a vacation. That'll be awesome.
Exactly.
We'll do it that way. But the books, absolutely. I think book 2 and 3 are going to be, honestly, eons better than book 1. And I enjoyed book 1, but it is slow going, and there is that little bit of arm's distance to things. But when he gets to the sci-fi stuff, the real big sci-fi stuff, it's fascinating.
You can tell that's his wheelhouse. That is what it seems like it's written by a native speaker, so to speak. So,
And book 2 and 3 is going to be much more heavily about the big sci-fi themes versus what book 1 does. So I'm really excited to dive into them in the future. And once again, your wine, Dallas. What are we drinking with this bad boy?
We have the Dynamico White 2023, which is you should drink this before its 5th birthday, apparently. We're coming up on 2 years, it's a lovely little wine.
Plenty of time. 80% Bical, 20% Arinto.
That's right. And what you got, Dave?
And I've still got my Bulgarian Mavrud from Telescope Winery, which, by the way, if you live in the States or anywhere in North America, really, maybe it'll ship to Canada. I'm not sure. There is a website, bighammerwines.com. I will have a link down in the description of this episode. Big Hammer Wines is carrying this for $9.99 a bottle.
Nice.
The retail price is $35 a bottle.
Oh, that's a deal. Jeez.
And if you buy 6, you get free shipping.
Oh, hell yeah. That's fantastic.
So 6 bottles for $59 and 94 cents and free shipping.
Wow.
So
That's
bighammerwines.com.
crazy deal. Wow.
Oh, no shit. That's why that's the link I'm putting down below. I'm like, guys, go get bighammerwines.com. I'll have a link down below. Go check that out. I think I'm going to get 6 bottles of that.
Seriously.
Yeah. This is my last bottle. I had 3 bottles of it, and this is my last of the 3. And so I'm ready. I'm ready to replenish the stock, and that's an amazing deal. So I'm gonna put that down in the link below. And once again, this has been Wine And. We will be back next week with another wine and entertainment pairing for your entertainment. Ciao for now. Talk later.
Later, guys.